Good morning, everyone. Today, I'll be presenting on a critical issue that affects how we consume information in the modern world, which is media bias. We'll explore what media bias is, how it can be detected, a real-world example, and ways to reduce its impact. I will also share some strategies for individuals to navigate biased media effectively. I'm T Yenzin, and with the student ID 037687. So, what is media bias? To begin, let's define what we can mean by media bias. Media bias refers to the tendency of journalists and news organizations to present information in a way that reflects a particular perspective. This unbalanced coverage can manifest in several ways, including the stories that are selected, how they are framed, the tone used, and even the language choices made. For example, we often see differences in how news outlets with differing political ideologies like Fox News and CNN covering the same event. Fox News, with its Republican leanings, may report the event in a way that appeals to its conservative audience, while CNN, with its more liberal stance, might present the same way in a way that resonates with Democrats. But media bias isn't just about political references. It also stems from the need of media outlets to maximize profits. To avoid backlash or alienating advertisers, news organizations may avoid controversial topics or give slanted coverage to attract certain audiences. In this way, media literacy becomes essential, understanding that no news is completely objective, and it's up to us as consumers to critically evaluate what we read and watch. So, media bias takes several forms, and I want to highlight some of the most prominent forms of media bias. First will be selection bias. This happens when news outlets decide which stories to cover and which to ignore. Often, this decision is influenced by ideological interests. Second, framing. This refers to the angle or perspective from which a story is presented. It involves the language used and the facts that are emphasized or downplayed. Third, sourcing bias. When a story relies on a source that has particular viewpoint, it can skew the way the story is told. Fourth, omission. Certain facts or details might be omitted to strengthen a particular narrative. Fifth, tone and language, where the words used in the news stories can carry connotations, describing a protest as a riot or labeling a politician as radical can subtly influence how people perceive the event or person. Lastly, partisan media, where some outlets are openly aligned with a political ideology, which can affect the stories they cover and how they report them. So, how is media bias detected? Now we have a clear understanding of what media bias is. Let's talk about how we can detect it. In the paper by Francisco, George, and Laura from 2023, the authors review methods used to identify media bias. They divided the techniques into two main categories, which are the traditional linguistic methods and deep learning approaches. These methods focusing on analyze text, speech patterns, and the story framing to identify whether an article or report is biased. While these methods are still evolving, the potential for improving the accuracy of automated media bias detection is still significant. As we continue to develop better tools, we can detect media bias more reliably and help the public make a more informed decisions. So my example of new bias is Google claims it fixed the frequency showing poll location for Harris searches but not for Trump. So to illustrate how media bias show up in the real world, let's look at this recent example involving Google. During the 2024 US presidential election, a technical issue arose with Google's search results for its polling locations. When users search for where I can vote for Harris, they were directed to an interactive map of polling places. However, searches for where I can vote for Trump did not trigger the same map. This discrepancy was due to a misunderstanding in Google's algorithm. The search term Harris also refers to Harris County in Texas, which caused the map to appear. The issue was resolved quickly, but it sparked accusations of bias from social media users, including Elon Musk. So we are looking this news from 3 different perspectives. First, Mashable, where it's a left-leaning outlet, downplayed the issue, framing it as a misunderstanding. They explained that the search tool was county-based, not candidate-specific, and clarified that another country names triggered the same exact results. The Hill, which tries to maintain a neutral stance, provided a straightforward explanation of the issue. They described how the glitch occurred and mentioned that some conservatives, including Trump, has accused Google of bias in the past. Third, the New York Post, a right-leaning outlet, focused more on the potential bias, pointing out that the issue disproportionately affected Trump's related searches. They framed the situation as an example of tech companies potentially being biased against conservative figures. As we can see, different sources took different approaches to cover the same exact event. This variation is a clear example of media bias in action, how news outlets' ideological leanings can affect how they report on even technical issues like this. So, moving on, let's discuss how we can reduce or counteract media bias in our own consumption of news. First, we are getting news from less biased outlets. While it's challenging to find completely unbiased media, outlets that aim for a balanced coverage are still a good starting point. Second, read from multiple sources. Always try to consume news from a variety of sources, especially with contrasting political perspectives. Third, engage in unbiased discussion. Use tools like Zeekr to have discussions about news without the influence of media bias, promoting a healthier, more open conversations. By using these 3 strategies, we can become more informed consumers of media, developing a more balanced perspective, and foster a more productive political dialogue. In conclusion, media bias is a pervasive issue that influences how we perceive the world around us. Recognizing it, understanding its form, and actively seeking diverse sources of information can help us overcome its effects. By being critical consumers of media, we can make more informed decisions and contribute to a healthier democratic process. Thank you for your attention, and that's all for my presentation.